Today we dive into portrait photography with the amazing Zoe Rain as we go behind the shot. Hi, welcome to Behind the Shot. I'm Steve Brazill. As always, it's a pleasure for you to join us. I am so glad that you're here. And a couple of notes before I bring on today's guest. First of all, yes, I've been gone for a while. After about 6 years of doing this show, last year just got weird, man. It got really busy with a lot of shows to shoot. But yes, as you can see from this show, I will still be doing the show. I've done a couple of special shows, like light review. I mean, I'm not sure that they're special, but you know what I mean. Light review, stuff like that. But I will be doing these normal shows as time allows. And hopefully I will at some point soon get back to a normal schedule. Okay, let's dive into this because I'm super excited for today's guest. I want to welcome to the show Chicago-based commercial photographer and filmmaker, Zoe Rain. Hi, Zoe. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Steve?
I'm doing quite well. You and I have been going back and forth for, 2 or 3 months getting this show together. And it is such a pleasure to finally meet you. I thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm glad we could finally connect.
You are in Chicago?
Yep. Yeah. Very close to the United Center.
Okay. I love Chicago. Fantastic town. If you've never been to Chicago, it's something that you should do. But before we get into the photograph that we're going to talk about today, which is a wonderful portrait of Ed Sheeran, I want to talk about you for a little bit. I kind of want to get to know you because there's something, as I research you, there's a couple of things that kind of stand out, but there's one thing that's really interesting. You've been doing this for a while. And correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm wrong, but you were pretty young when the Macklemore Ryan Lewis work that you did took off. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was, I think a junior or maybe even a sophomore in high school when I got connected with them, and I was trying to get into venues and shows that were 21 and up, and take photos. Yeah.
So how did you end up, getting connected with them is one thing, but how does somebody that's a junior in high school end up touring so young? And I'm really curious, both from the age point of view, from the female point of view, from just the entire tour life point of view, what was that experience like for you?
Yeah. So I had a great mentor who came into my photo class in high school, and he kind of brought to life the fact that you can make money doing this, which is, I'd never considered making art. I love photography, but it was just kind of a hobby. And so as soon as I heard that, I was at his hip, whatever you want to do. And ultimately at that time, it was weddings was wow, that's a dream career. I'll shoot weddings. It was just the bar was so low. And he was close friends with Ryan Lewis, and met Macklemore through him when they were kind of working together and starting their first project. And so they were, very indie DIY. They'd never had a label, and, Seattle based, really paying for everything, organizing everything, doing their music videos. And so, Jason was helping out, shooting on, I think, a Nikon D800, one of their first music videos, other side. And I was just there. I wanted to shoot behind the scenes. I wanted to carry cables. I wanted to, whatever it was. Obviously that was, I was inspired by the music and inspired just by the energy of all of it and kind of the indie scene that was surrounding them. And so that happened for a few years, and I would, take photos of music videos behind the scenes for a photo class assignment. I'm sure my fellow people in my class did not appreciate that. But it was an incredible way to learn really quickly. And as you would know, smaller venues, maybe there's a spotlight, but usually it's dark and chaotic, and there's lasers, and you're working with the hardest conditions to get a good picture. And so that was a really great way to just force my way through the mud and learn how to do that. And then, once it came to tour a few years later, it was so much easier to be, we suddenly were in these giant venues after Thrift Shop kind of broke and everything blew up. And so we immediately were I was 20 and sent to, I think the first show was in UK somewhere, and was just kind of flung into the action of these large clubs and, on a tour bus. I was put on a tour bus with the opener at the time, who I didn't know, with Chance the Rapper. And so they had literally thrown there was two other video guys with me that they'd kind of scrapped together, and I was taking photos, and they put us on the only bus space they had, which was, this like 70s shag carpet tour bus, with Chance. And so it was like very chaotic. They'd never toured, and it's not like a label putting it together. It's,
Right.
this Macklemore and his girlfriend figuring it out with Ryan. Like, it was very, it was chaos, but it was fun. And it's very much like a family dynamic in a way that I haven't experienced with other artists. And just being that, like, they, Ben brought up his friends and the people around him, as he had, gotten large and brought his community together. So everyone kind of already felt close and knew each other, and it really, it didn't feel like a bunch of mix matched people put on a bus. It really felt like a group that had already had this like relationship and family vibe.
You said something really interesting to me when you said, as in clubs, it's, no spotlight, if at all, any light. Often it's just backlight. And I tell people all the time that there's this misconception that in music photography, you start here, and as you get better and bigger and doing bigger shows and bigger venues, the complexity comes in, and it's literally the opposite. I shoot stadium shows or arena shows, and it's like shooting in daylight, whereas you shoot these small club shows with these small, I'll use an example of some of the metal bands that are out. You shoot these, 1,000-seaters or whatever, and it's literally one set of truss with lights on it. Behind them, they're silhouette the whole night. And we as photographers still have to find a way to tell that story, which the lighting director is presenting to the audience, and the audience loves, right? And then the stages are so confined and so crowded. You've got mic stands out of people's heads. If you can shoot in small clubs, you can kind of shoot anything. It's an insane thing. But here's the thing. In my time as a concert photographer, we were talking in the green room before. I have a lot of friends that are music photographers, that are tour photographers, many of them being female. And I'm kind of curious because I've talked to a lot of people over the years that point to, and by the way, and I've seen firsthand, that male photographers and female photographers in a photo pit, on a tour, whatever the case might be, whether you're touring or not, are treated differently. And I'm curious if in your experience, which is more vast than mine in that kind of world, do you see that when touring? Do you have any personal experiences of that, at least that you're willing to share?
Yeah. I think the tour I was on was a really safe environment because, they have first three songs in the pit, obviously. So you're kind of experiencing local photographers that way. But I usually like to not be shooting in the pit during that, just because I know that's the shot they're going to get that angle. So I prefer to shoot it from a different perspective. But I would say I've more experienced that shooting festivals for sure. But I think I'm a very tall person. I'm like covered in tattoos, and if I have a camera in my hand and I'm like focused and determined to get a shot, like, you're not getting in my fucking way, like,
right.
Which is kind of the attitude you need. And I think maybe, in society, a lot of like women, we tend to just like apologize for being in the way. And like, it's just kind of ingrained in us, to not take up space. And you really have to take up space, in the pit in order to get where you need to be and position yourself and be respected. So not to say that, I haven't experienced that, or, it's an even playing field, but, I tried to not let it affect me or get in the way of getting the shot.
And there is something to be said for that old idea of, if you act like you belong, right? Yeah. I've had venues where I needed to go somewhere, And I had to walk through a kitchen where chefs were standing, but nobody questioned that I was walking through there because I walked through with I don't know the word I'm looking for. Geez, like this. I walked through just like I'm supposed to be there. Like there's nothing to look at here. I'm walking through here and nobody cares, and you're not going to care either. There's a lot to be said for that. You mentioned Chance the Rapper. Interesting how you ended up on the bus with somebody who ends up being A-list artist now. But you've also worked with Christina Aguilera, Kesha, and Ed Sheeran, who we're going to talk about today. And you also have some corporate clients like Nike and Wingstop and Jordan and Rivian. Do you have, at this point in your career, right, do you prefer a certain type of client or gig? I mean, do you still prefer the live stuff? Do you prefer the behind the scenes or portrait stuff? Do you prefer dealing with the corporate clients, or do you not care one way or the other?
I think every type of job has its own excitement or enjoyment because of it. I think like I enjoy corporate or portraiture or commercial because there's more control, and it feels like I'm able to establish my style and take control of the situation, and so that is a nice way to like show my skill set and kind of my talents individually versus I think live music, you kind of are at the will and whim of the color design and the light design, and making it unique within while working in that atmosphere, which is a fun experience too. I would say like the energy I get from shooting live shows, which I'm sure you like know very well, it's unlike anything else, and that's like I am like a giddy, hyped up, caffeinated human being. Like I just love it, right? And so that paired with like having the opportunity to have a one-on-one or a portrait with a musical artist would probably be me. If I could do that and make a living just doing that, I'd probably only do that.
It's funny because I try explaining this to people who haven't done what we do, and it's kind of hard to explain, but one of my favorite energies ever in life is about 30 seconds before a headliner takes the stage, because there is a palpable thickness of energy in a room from an audience, a good audience, that I'm sorry, you can't get that anywhere else. Like you can feel it before they hit the stage in this wonderful magic way. And I don't think there's anything else, at least for me, that kind of scratches that itch. Your work has really been recognized. You've been in Rolling Stone. You've been on subway car ads, billboards, and you've even done some speaking gigs, right? You've been a keynote speaker for Apple, various industry panels. But you do some personal projects that are interesting to me. 30/30 Project, Construction for Change, and you have a portrait series, Women of Togo. Explain the Women of Togo for me.
That had kind of transpired while on site, and I shoot 30 for 30 and Construction for Change. They come in and build, hospitals or maternity wards in spaces that need them. And so, and even schools, we've documented, some of the infrastructure and the communities that affects. And I actually believe the Women of Togo or People of Togo was kind of shortly after shooting this photo of Ed. It kind of the lighting, which, is very much just a simple forward top light and a bounced light from beneath to light the eyes. Just like a very simple setup, and I was able to use it just with the light of the sun, because I mean Africa's gorgeous. It's like a whole different light than you experience here. Once I figured out how easy it was to do that on site, it was and everyone like seeing their photo, people get very excited, and so it was easy to have like basically just like a run and gun shooting portraits of filing people in. So we were able to do it really quickly, have it be really cohesive, and it really felt powerful in the moment. And so we just decided to capture the faces behind the projects in a way that felt very personal and up close.
I love that because I believe personal projects can they can change you as a human, but they can definitely change, I think, your entire photographic voice.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Both in the type of projects that you pick to be your personal projects and the way you end up executing them. I think, something like that can literally change your live music photography. It makes you, I think, see humanity or see the world differently. I mean, agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very, very powerful project to have completed and look back on for sure.
So let's get into a photography question here because I like to ask this of every guest. This is the thinking cap portion. What makes a great photo great?
I mean, I think the original answer is, what is a photograph? What is the purpose to stop a moment? I agree with that, but I think it is more focused on the energy of the moment, right? Like just as that palpable energy that is, right before someone goes on stage. It's not something that you can discern or see, or you just feel it. And I think that similar energy is what makes a good photo. But I don't know if it feels kind of next level where it's not something that you can discern, but you can't describe it, but we've all felt it and can have that experience, yeah, with a good photo.
So let's go to the business side because this is another question I like to ask people that I know are also business people, which you are. The Rain Studio, which is your studio space, you also rent that space out. And I think it's an area, for example, you mentioned you were in photography class when the whole Macklemore Ryan Lewis thing started. And I think a lot of people, whether they're trained in photography or pick it up on their own, I think they misunderstand the business side of things. And at least the lesser experienced people, I think, do. I suppose some experienced people do too. As a business owner, and this goes to the wedding thing that you mentioned earlier too, I know a lot of wedding photographers that would much rather be out shooting weddings, but that's not how business works. What percentage of time, how do you think it divides up between the business side of what you do versus the actual having a camera in your hand?
Probably 10% shooting, 90% back end, whether that's editing, whether that's emails, taxes, whether that's at an event, networking or socializing or meeting new people. I feel like I'm rarely shooting anymore, which is I think what also is great about personal projects because it just forces you to continue to be active and like flexing that muscle. Because we always have like seasons and going through it now. It's been 12 years for me, but I had to learn that there will be lulls and waves, and it's not going to be this steady. I have this many days that I shoot. Like there could be a month you don't shoot. There could be a month that you shoot almost every day. So yeah, it always depends, but it's a lot of back end that people don't think about.
The life of a freelancer.
Yeah.
All right. So real quick, before we jump into the shot, just a quick reminder for everybody, especially those of you that have not seen the show before. This show is Behind the Shot. The website is behindtheshot.tv. If you head over there, you can find a great back catalog of shows. And I should add, part of the reason I like doing this show is because very rarely is the content that we talk about, because we're talking about a photograph, it's not time sensitive. Right? You can go check out Joe McNally from 2 years ago, or you can go check out Trey Ratcliffe from 3.5 years ago, and they both still fit. So go check out the website. You can find all the episodes there. Plus, if you're a podcast listener, Behind the Shot is available wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple, Google, whatever the case might be, wherever you get your podcast, you'll be able to find it in two forms. It's available in an audio-only format like a standard podcast, but the video is also available as a podcast if your podcast outlet supports video. If it doesn't, then make sure to head on over to YouTube, because I do put the videos up on YouTube. While you're there, if you're watching on YouTube, head down below the like and subscribe button. All the show notes are down there, just like they are over on the blog. There's not as many notes. So on the blog post that I do for this show, I write a little bit about my guest, and I can't do that on YouTube. There's some character limits that they have there, but still, any links that we talk about, anything like that, those are in the description on YouTube as well. Let's get back into this, because there's one question that I have, and you mentioned wedding as we were talking earlier. When I brought up the shot I'm about to bring up myself, I always go look at EXIF data, and because I try and discern, exposure data and all of that type of stuff. In the metadata, it actually says Chicago destination wedding photographer. Do you still do weddings?
That. No. And I mean, this shot is from 2016, but yeah, I was looking at like my f-stop and all those things, and I was like, proud of myself that I had done the metadata at that point, because it's taken a long time to get every duck in line. But yeah, it's funny that it does say that. But no, I do weddings for friends, but not anymore.
But you do have all the metadata in there, which I like. And you've got your name in there and stuff like that, which I can't recommend to people. It's so easy to do, folks, whether you're using Capture One or Lightroom or Photo Mechanic or a combination of the above, or whatever software, Luminaire, whatever software you're using, put your metadata, especially your copyright information in there. I'm a big proponent, by the way, of registering your copyright with the U.S. Copyright Office, even if you're overseas. Long story there. So let's talk about this shot, because this shot of Ed Sheeran, if I were Ed, this is what I would want my headshot and my portrait to look like. Like, this is a classic headshot. And you and I were talking in the green room before I started recording about my friend Christy Goodwin, who, folks, if you don't know Christy, she's been a guest on the show a bunch of times, an amazing music photographer, house photographer at the Royal Albert Hall in London. And she was one of the first ones to shoot Ed when he was unknown. She tells on one of the shows that she was on the story of how that whole thing happened. She did a book on Ed Sheeran. And here's a guy that in this day and age has been photographed a ton. And if I'm him and I look at this come out of Zoe's camera, I am happy as hell. So I want to get the story on this. First of all, let's get the technical stuff out of the way. According to the EXIF data, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're a Nikon shooter. This was a D810, an 85 millimeter 1.4 shot at 85, 2/50th of a second. Aperture was f6, and it was interesting. First of all, white balance was auto. It looked like you shot in manual mode, but it's interesting that there was no ISO information in the EXIF data, and I'm not sure why. Was this auto ISO, or do you know what the ISO was?
Interesting. No, I don't know what it was, but yeah, it would have been all manual.
Okay. So let's start with your choice of aperture and lens and shutter. 85 1.4, which, by the way, is a classic wedding lens, right? Wedding photographers love 85 millimeter 1.4 or 1.2. What was your idea in shooting at 85 millimeters at f6?
I think when I picked up the 85 and started experimenting with it, I did enjoy it more for live shows. I hadn't really experimented with anything that was 1.4 before. And I think that was the first lens a fixed lens that I, was able to handle and kind of see that depth of field, which I enjoyed. But it just feels like the perfect focal length for this shot, like a tight headshot. I just think it's really flattering, and it's, a good distance for me to be from someone where I'm not up in their face, but I'm not like, so far away that we're not engaging with each other.
Right.
And I think just the f6, I wanted to get his like lips and his glasses and a little bit of hair and his eyes crisp, and have a little bit of fall off, but wasn't looking for it to be relying super heavy on a very bokeh low depth of field.
So I'm going to mention the depth of field that you use here when I describe this verbally. For those of you that are on the audio feed, I will describe this shot to you. I won't do it justice, trust me, but I'm going to talk about that depth of field because I truly love what you did depth of field with. F6 was spot on for this. And I can actually imagine even if you'd gone even 5.6 or 5, or if you'd gone to 8, it instantly would have been too much or too little to me. The 2/50th of a second, you're clearly using artificial lighting here. Why the 2/50th? Were you just trying to block out all ambient? Was there another reason you went 250?
I'm kind of surprised, to be honest. I think because I'm using ProPhoto strobes, I'm surprised that the 250 didn't give me a little bit of a banding. It usually wants to be under 200. But I think with it being a bright enough shot, I guess it was a limited amount of time that I was taking a photo of him, and I just didn't want there to be some sort of blur for any reason. So I was happy to just sit as high as I could without it, banding from the flash. Make sure there wasn't a subtle motion blur that would have driven me crazy in post.
So you mentioned you didn't have a lot of time. How much time did you have for this?
So he had actually been, Mark Surge is one of his photographers that travels with him, a good friend of his, and they had come into Chicago and needed a space to shoot. And I have connections with Ed, that same mentor that had taught me in high school. He has shot the music video for like 6 of Ed's music videos, but like Shape of You, which is one of his biggest. His name's Jason, is my mentor, and he directed it. So that's kind of how we became good friends with Ed. And so I was like, I have a studio, and at the time it was a larger space in Pilsen and the area in Chicago, and it was a large open loft that I lived in as well. So he showed up at my front door, and they were kind of shooting together, and we were playing pool, and it was kind of very casual. They just needed some space to kind of interact with some good light. And then I just asked, can I take a couple pictures? And Ed said, sure, whatever you need. And I think at the time I wasn't as confident in kind of directing someone's attention for a long period of time. So I really wanted to make it super quick and convenient. So I think I probably shot 20 frames. I had him close his eyes, took a shot, had him open his eyes, and that's the image that I got to kind of give it a little bit of life. But it was, a very brief interaction, and happily it feels like there was a real connection and like a moment of breath that we exchanged.
So in the scenario you described for how you got this we want to call it a gig, how you got this shot, none of an artist like Ed Sheeran, even in those days, right? You didn't have a team of his looking over your shoulder or anything.
No, it was three of us. So it was me and Ed and another photographer.
Wow. Okay. Because see, to me, in my head, it's like Ed's in front of the camera, and there's 3 of his team members standing around checking everything that happened. So for those of you that are on audio, let me try and describe this shot. And Zoe, if I butcher it, my apologies in advance. But I guess the easiest way to start is what I said earlier. This shot is a classic headshot style portrait of Ed Sheeran. You've got this kind of gray background that has a gradient. It's a little hotter in the upper right corner and kind of fades out down towards the left, which I love that it's not the standard, hot behind his head and gradients radial out. It's not a linear gradient though. It's more of a radial gradient. It's just hotter, not right behind his head. It's up in the upper right corner, comes down over his right shoulder. It's still pretty bright, but as it crosses to the other side of his head, it kind of gradients out to a little bit of darkness. But what makes this to me is that 85 millimeter. Like you can see it. That he is looking right down the barrel of the lens. The camera is exactly eye level. And it's a wonderful, tight headshot style crop, almost Peter Hurley-esque in that there's a little bit of hair, not a lot, not exactly Hurley style, but a little bit of hair off the top. On the right-hand side, there's a little bit of gap between him and the edge of the frame. And on the left-hand side, there's a little bit more or less, a little looser crop on the left-hand side, which is nice. I've seen in image competitions I've judged where people try and put it closer to one side and it doesn't feel balanced. But it feels totally balanced here because of, I would argue at least, how relaxed Ed is. Like his shoulders are so relaxed that I feel relaxed looking at him because she's nodding her head. You know what I mean, right? There's something in the demeanor of his shoulders that's so comfortable, right?
Yeah, it is very calming. And he's such a laid back guy, like for how famous he is. He is the least celebrity esque celebrity I've ever interacted with.
This comes across like a family portrait, and it's cropped. By the way, I should say it's portrait orientation. It's cropped just below his necklace. The image. This goes back to that depth of field in that 85 1.4 shot at f6. The image is almost 3D feeling, right? Tack sharp eyes, tack sharp face, hair. As it falls back, the shirt is a little bit soft. Those relaxed shoulders kind of add to the softness. And then you get to the color. The skin tones and eye color here are next level fantastic. Like this is, if I were to meet Ed, specifically the glasses and the eyes, that 3D kind of feeling I'm getting, and it may just be me, but that's how I feel, right? The skin tone and eye color and the processing on the eyes here is so killer that it literally draws you in. And by the way, he's also got that almost Peter Hurley style jawline as though he's moving his head forward. This is just ever so spot on, right? And there is that, if you see any interviews with Ed Sheeran or any, photos or anything, he doesn't smile like a lot of people do in a photo. And yet here, there is this ever so slight turn up on the corner of his mouth. Did I miss anything in this?
No, you explained it. You pointed out things I didn't even notice. So I think you did a great job.
Okay, good. So did you coach him or pose him at all?
No, not at all. Other than, having him close his eyes, take a deep breath, and then open his eyes. That was the only directive, really.
Did you try and snap it like as soon as he opened his eyes as a surprise, or you let him open his eyes, kind of settle in, and then snap it?
No, I think I have a shot of him eyes closed, and then the moment they opened, I probably did a little burst to grab a few, and I think I just this knew I got it. Like, yeah.
So let's take a hypothetical here, right? Leave Ed behind for a minute. Let's say that, clearly this guy knows what he's doing. And most A-list stars have been in front of cameras so much, they walk in, they nail it, they leave. But I've met rock stars that in all honesty are fine on a stage in front of 20,000 people. But in a room with one person taking their photograph, there's an intimacy there they're not comfortable with. And whether they do it all day or not, they're not that natural. So when you have that kind of a situation, do you get involved and do you help them, pose them, make them look more natural?
I think starting my career shooting senior portraits, I don't think there's a more awkward stage of life or
Yeah,
subject to be
exactly.
photographing than a high school senior. So I feel like once you nail that and you know how to make people feel comfortable in that setting, it's a piece of cake from there. And I've found that just anything that I can do to get people not thinking about themselves is how you immediately can break that awkwardness. Whether it's I've at times almost like played dumb or tripped on a chord or something where like they're immediately focused on, oh, she looks stupid. Like, great, I'll take it if I can get you to literally get out of your head. And that's kind of the price you pay to make people feel comfortable.
It's funny because my next question to you was going to be, how do you get people in front of the camera to be comfortable? And you went right into it. So you're going to be on every show now. Let's jump back into this shot, because one of the things I think may be the star here. I talk about the depth of field, yes, but let's be honest, we capture light and shadow. And I think the star here is this, I'm going to use the word, and I don't mean this in a bad way at all, but the simplistic, not too much, less is more, but done right lighting that you have here. And if you look at this shot right here and right here, you can see reflections catch lights in the eye. And it looks like maybe a beauty dish. I'm not sure. It doesn't look softbox light. I'm not sure. But the other thing is down here under the jaw, based on where this light's coming in, kind of, it looks like from that angle, or actually more like straight in, not straight down. I'm not doing that to say straight down, but it's more centered on his face, but coming in at a slight angle. That jawline, I would think, would be more shadowed. So it's like you had some reflector or something underneath, which you kind of alluded to earlier. Tell me what you did lighting wise here.
So, I would agree with you that, sometimes simplicity is best. I think there's so many incredible photos that I've seen taken with just a single light. And I think, when people first get into flash, you just want to pummel with light and, use them all. You think the more strobes, the better. And usually it's, pulling back and having one direction of light is best. For this, it was a beauty dish, without a grid or anything, just open. And I was, aiming to have it be, directly in front of him, kind of at a 45-degree angle. And I think it's pushed a little bit to the right, just so I can get my lens in front of him, so I'm looking him straight on. So it's coming down, and then I think right under the crop, he's basically holding a big whiteboard to just catch that light. So you can kind of see in his actual eyes the big, almost like square board, and that kind of brought a little bit of light under his chin.
So that's just a flat, like, white piece of foam board?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So, couple questions then. And again, for those of you that are watching this that have never tried to dissect a photo, I highly recommend, if you find a photo that you love, do what we're doing here, right? Sit down. Now, she knows how she shot it. I don't. Sit down and look at it and really honestly try and reverse engineer it. And I don't mean reverse engineer it to try and recreate it, right? Although that can be a learning experience for you. But if you look on this eye right here, you'll actually see that the catch light of that beauty dish is not exactly centered. The other eye, it is a little bit more, but you can kind of tell that light's a little bit off center. You can look at his nose shadow to see exactly kind of what the angle of the light is. And then if you think about that, if you were out in the sun and you had that kind of light coming at you at 45 degrees down, you'd be shadowed under here. You can tell something's down there, and I didn't even catch it. You can see the reflector in his eye there. That's pretty cool. When you're doing a shot like this, why? This is an area I struggle with, because I shoot almost only live music, right? I don't do a lot of artificial light. I have a ton of them. I've used them. I would never claim to be any good at it at all, let alone fast enough at it. But modifier choice is an area that people ask me about a lot because they struggle. Do I want an umbrella? If I have an umbrella, do I want a reflected umbrella? Do I want a shoot through umbrella, right? Do I want a softbox? If I have a softbox, do I want a grid? And here you chose a beauty dish. Why the beauty dish?
I mean, this is what it's made for. Like that's literally what it's called as a beauty dish because it has this. It's like a soft, hard light, which you really can't achieve with any other, modifier that I've experienced. Because I do like if I had used a softbox, it there wouldn't have been a defined jawline. You wouldn't have as defined shadows. It'd be just a little bit more kind of blown out generally. There'd not be as much dimension. But again, if you'd use just a bare bulb, it's going to be too harsh. It's just going to, you know, there's something about the beauty dish that I really enjoy, and it is a very small window of this soft, hard light that you get from beauty dishes, which is why it's really difficult to shoot with them in a wider scene, right? Because the edges are you'll get a harsh light around it, and so it just felt like the perfect light for I really knew I wanted to get this tight shot. Yeah,
How far away is the light from him?
it's probably right at my shoulder, so I don't know where. I mean, I think probably I was probably 2.5 feet from him, maybe three.
Okay. Yeah, because one of the things I love about the look of this light, actually, I'm sitting here dissecting it as you're talking, and it's that beauty dish look, right? If you look at his eyes, there's a crispness of all the edges that you're getting between where it fades. But look at the shadow under his glasses. So you have a soft edge, but unlike a softbox where the edge feathers over a longer period, it's kind of like if you do a drop shadow in Photoshop, you can choose how wide that shadow spreads out. It's the same thing here. It's a hard light in the sense that the distance between darkness and pure light isn't very far. It's a short fade distance, but it's still a fade. It's not a hard edge. You get a soft edge. And you can see it under his nose. You can see it under his bottom lip. And then again, that jawline, my God, is just fantastic. I'm wondering actually if on his own he did this little cheat move his head forward thing to get that jawline, because that was really good. You, because of your history, you've been around so many people like this where their public image really matters. And sometimes their public image matters more to them than it does to the PR person, right? Everybody has vanity in them. Everybody has a sense of, there are lead singers who walk out on a stage with a little bit of a belly hanging over their belt and no shirt on, and they don't care, right? And then there's very attractive lead guitarists who still want to see the shot and go, I just don't think I look good in that for whatever reason. Like I've had shots I love that I know the person in them didn't like, and I can't figure it out because to me, I'm really picky. I don't want to show a shot that is not flattering to the subject, because even if it's a type of music I don't buy and listen to, I highly respect what they're doing on the stage. I want them to be flattered by the shot. You can't read minds. Because of what you do, photographing people like this, whose public image, both from a career and to their personal sense of self, matters so much. When you shoot a shot like this, specifically your lighting, your key points of lighting or composition or whatever, first of all, I guess, do you test it ahead of time? Do you do a stand-in a lot of times? You may not have here, but do you pre-shoot with a stand-in so they can walk in, snap it out, and go? And what are the key points you're looking for when you shoot this in camera? What are you looking at going, no, or yes?
Yeah, it totally depends as far as having a stand-in or not. I think with shoots that are more set or there's, a longer period of time, it's always ideal to test your light. But even in those cases, I find that, with height differences and face shape differences, like you're gonna have your subject come in and there's gonna have to be some adjustments, made from
Right.
the person that you were test shooting. But I think, and maybe I've always attributed this to being a woman, I think, especially shooting other women, because I've seen, I have a lot of male photographer friends and guys that I see photos of women they've taken, and I immediately know, oh, she's not going to like that. Just because
Why?
guys are,
Why? What is it? Help us men
yeah,
who are idiots. Let's be clear. Help us understand why what are we missing?
I think there's so much societal pressure on women, and there's every little thing needs to be perfect. I think men get a little bit more leeway visually. You can't have like a dad bod's hot, but like on a woman, there's not really a stereotype of a woman with a tummy
Right.
that's like a cool thing, right? So, society wise, like we're hyper attuned to that. And I think just that sensitivity and detail orientation, and just being a woman myself, I think, you just learn uh, over the years what things are commonly insecurities. And I think seeing someone and trying to um, be aware of what their potential insecurities might be, which is kind of an interesting perspective to have, and maybe feels a little vain in the idea of you're looking for someone's faults, but you kind of need to be, because you need to be aware of them and learn how to um, draw, right, we use light, draw the eye away from things that aren't maybe flattering, and draw the light to where, how they want to be seen. um, and there's so many tricks, just with camera angles, with lenses, with harsh light versus soft light. I typically don't shoot women in harsher light. Men often can and take it a little bit more, and it's a little bit more forgiving. So,
Well, and also
there's
with
just
men, if you shoot men with harsh light and you show the creases in their face and the pores in their face, for some reason society calls that texture and character,
right.
and you're going to get that from a harsh light. And with women, that would be frowned upon.
Right. Yeah. There's a little bit of a double standard, obviously, that makes it, women are a little bit more finely looked at and judged. But yeah, I mean, I've worked with artists that don't want me to photograph them from the left side ever. Like, I don't like my left side. I don't ever want to see a photo of my left side, which, me taking photos before I knew that, I'm like, this is an amazing picture. And it's already like, it's from the wrong angle. Sorry. Like, I don't care if I'm blowing fire. Like, it's not a good shot because I don't like it.
Right.
And so I think there's just that, there's always going to be kind of a struggle to, people are more insecure of themselves than other people are judging them and viewing them. And so, you're never going to be able to spot and navigate around everyone's insecurities, but being aware of it. And I do appreciate you saying that you try to put people in a good light. I think that could be a mistake of photographers, that, it's a really cool photo, but the person doesn't look good. It doesn't matter. Like, they need to look, presentable and in a good light, or else they're not going to like it. And that's my first duty and job as a photographer, is making sure that my subject feels seen and feels beautiful and feels respected. And so, yeah, that's just something kind of you learn over time, but it's never perfectible, for sure.
It's funny because from people that shoot for media, okay. So a lot of music photographers shoot for quote unquote media outlets. They get media credentials, but they don't necessarily treat it as traditional media. For example, in traditional media, no, you don't remove that microphone stand. That's a journalistic integrity issue. But a lot of music photographers, their attitude is, and their outlets are okay with it. My radio station doesn't care what I post, although I don't do that, but still, the attitude is, I want to convey the concept of the show, and I don't care if it's 100% real. But when you're photographing humans, it's weird, because if you're on tour with somebody, you may learn what they like. But if you're photographing 3 songs of them once a year, every spring, You may not understand what their vanity is, what their issues with their self vision is, and you can't read minds. So it becomes somewhat difficult to do. And so, like what I always do is think to myself, if that was my sister, if that was my wife, would she really want to be seen? I mean, we all have a woman in our life that we love dearly and care about, and just put them in that position and try and think. And even then, you're going to get it wrong sometimes. But I see people do these photo dumps on social media of a show. First of all, stop, because you dumped 25 shots and one of them was really good. Maybe I'll give you 2 to be nice. So now I don't think you're as good of a photographer as you probably would have been seen as if you only dumped 1. But 2, some of those simply aren't the shot. Yes, they're breathing fire. Okay. But if the analogy I always use is sit in front of the news, whatever your news channel of choice is, and hit pause and try and pause a news anchor that doesn't go like that.
Yeah.
It's really hard to freeze a moment in time during motion and get that moment. But that's your job, right?
Especially
if they're breathing
singing.
Fire, say again, I'm sorry.
Especially with people singing. It's like
exactly
a lot of unflattering shots. Yeah.
And that's your job. You've got frames per second you can use. If it didn't work, then you should have got it the next time around. Or I've had it to where the bass player jumped off a riser and, oh my God, I want to get it. And I've messed it up. The fact that it's blurry means that I won't post it. It should be the same for everything else. Nobody knows the shots you don't show them. Nobody knows I missed that jump shot, right? Yeah, I could go down a rabbit hole on this one. So are there any of those never do this things with lighting that you think of?
I mean, maybe not so with lighting, but the first thing for live show that obviously comes to mind, which you'll see a lot of artists, their PR or managers won't allow it, is shooting directly up at someone from a pit. Like nobody looks good when you're looking up their nose. Like that's never going to be a flattering angle. It's very rare. Maybe the one, perfectly gorgeously boned human being, it might look good on, but generally it's not going to be the best angle. So that's you can just knock that off your list of, you don't need to be in that position. But yeah, lighting wise, I think, softer light is always better. Harsh light can be harsh. And I think light from below is not great. If anyone that's been to, a sleepover where you tell scary stories knows that is kind of a terrifying look on most people.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're on a desert island. You're allowed to have one lighting setup. What is it?
Oh, what am I photographing? Are there people of interest on this desert island?
See, it's the follow-up questions that kill me every time. Yes. You have a singer you love and a singer you don't love.
Okay, well,
but you're only allowed one lighting setup.
Right. I think as far as having versatility, I'd probably go with, one pro photo strobe with a softbox, like a 3-footer, not too big, but like 3 feet where you can, shoot a portrait, or you can you shoot a more moody, full body shot. And I guess, yeah, probably another strobe in there to have like a kicker or like a snoot on it. I don't know, hair light. I mean, I'd pack all my lights, but yeah, that's a hard question.
Okay. So last thing before we finish up here. There's something in this photo about the processing that I love, and I'm not sure what it is, but there's something with the way this photo is just brought together in digital form that's awesome. What would you have done to this shot in post? Do you remember?
Honestly, this is one of the only photos that I have no idea what I did. I edit in Lightroom and have, a plethora um, of presets that I've made that are just from past photos. I'll save it. And so it can be a nice, even just starting point to kind of fan through them and see how they look. Whether you use them, usually it's kind of as a baseline and then you adjust for the photo. But yeah, I don't know. And I agree. I don't know if I could recreate it. It's not super far off from the original. But I would say, I generally add, there's some like cyan in the shadows, and maybe like a magenta too, maybe in the midtones. It's definitely a little bit cooled down, but
Hold
yeah,
on.
I don't know.
You normally do that? Cyan in the shadows and magenta in the skin tones?
I think when I started out, like I enjoyed blues and the shadows, whether it's a cyan or just taking some yellow out. But
So your goal is to you like that cooler effect?
yeah,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah.
All right. I love that. I have things to play with now. Would you have done, do you think, anything to the eyes? It's almost as though the iris, I mean, are his eyes that his iris is that vibrant?
Yeah, I mean, they might be potentially. I added a little bit of vibrance, and then I know I sharpened them, just the pupils. But
So
yeah, I'm
good,
trying to
Zoe.
pull up the original. Yeah, thank you. It's one of my favorites.
Jesus, it is so damn good. All right. We're going to switch tactics here. We're going to go into a speed round to close out. For these questions, the idea is it's a speed round. I'm going to ask the question, you answer. The truth is, if you go a little long, nobody really knows or cares. So give whatever answer you want. But the idea behind it is you got to go with it. Your top
Okay.
photography tip.
Oh, shoot. My top photography tip. That's a hard one. I think directional light. If you're out in the world and you can find some sort of cover or shade, to immediately give the light direction, it's really helpful versus it just being blasted from everywhere from the sun.
Okay. Top tour photography tip or music photography
Don't,
tip. Could be either one.
uh, don't stand where everyone else is standing because you're going to get the same shot. Try to pull back and get a more interesting perspective.
I mentioned to you earlier that I did a thing with El Macias for quite a while during the pandemic. And one of the questions he would always ask, and so I have to ask it in Adam's honor, when you're on tour, shower shoes, yes or no?
No, but I probably should.
Okay. Biggest photo mistake you have made or almost made?
There's definitely been some uh, damaged cards or hard drives. I've lost some photos that I deeply regret losing.
Favorite composition rule if you have one?
Um, break the rules.
I like it. Favorite band or performer?
Got to go with Macklemore. Best live show.
I got to see it someday. Favorite drink?
Whiskey.
Really?
Yep. Whiskey
Oh,
neat.
you and me are going to be friends.
Yeah, there you go.
I collect whiskey. I've got
I
now,
love
well,
that.
I was just at Imaging USA, which I went to specifically because it was in Louisville, and I wanted to do my second trip to the Bourbon Trail. I now have about 180 bottles of whiskey.
Wow. See, I would just drink them. That's the problem. I'm not very good at collecting them, but that's cool.
Oh, my collection is not to sit on a shelf. I am willing to open any bottle that I own. There's a couple I'm holding until my kid comes home, and next time he's home, I'll probably open them, but it's a working collection.
Great.
Last one. Favorite movie or TV show?
Fight Club.
Interesting choice. Didn't see that coming. And to finish out, is there any photographer out there that you don't think gets enough attention that people should know about and follow?
Oh, that's a great one. There's so many that I feel unfair giving just one. And I have a list, and I don't have it up. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have one.
Okay, that works for me. So again, Zoe, thank you so much for doing this. I do want people to be able to find you. So if people want to find you, what's your website?
Rainstudio.com.
Rainstudio.com, RAIN studio.com. Instagram, it's Zoe Rain Photo, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so folks, go follow Zoe, give her some love, follow her everywhere. If you like this show, please refer it to people. But Zoe, thank you so much for doing this. It took us a while to get this going, and I am so glad that we did. I really, 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 really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. It's been fun. It's great to meet you, and it was a great chat.
Oh, we got to have a whiskey together. This is going to be amazing.
I would love that.
Oh my God, I can't wait. So folks, a couple of notes here. First of all, make sure that you go check out the blog post associated with this show. Every show that I do, there's a blog post at behindtheshot.tv. If you want to follow me, it's stevebrazill.com is the portfolio. It's like the country Brazil, but 2 L's. Or if you want to hit me up on social media, Twitter, Mastodon, Blue Sky. It's not Twitter, X. Okay, whatever. Instagram, all of those. It's at Steve Brazill, again, like the country Brazil, but 2 L's. If you're watching on YouTube and you like what you saw, please make sure that you hit subscribe, hit the bell, choose that you get the notification always. And any links that we mentioned are in the description on YouTube. But if you want the full blog post and all the links as well, you can again head over to the website. It's behindtheshot.tv. Again, thank you so much to my guest this time around, Zoe Rain. Make sure that you join us next time as we take a look inside the mind of a great photographer by taking a closer look behind the shot.